Oh, good morning, everybody.
Good to see you.
Good to see you too. Feels like a long time since I've seen some of you.
Yes.
But you're looking well. You're looking well. This is my first visit to Carmel and I'm pleased to be here, so thank you for your invitation. Got a few thoughts I want to share and hopefully you will be encouraged. Thank you for those kind words, Andrew. Wow, that was nice. As Andrew said, I've been, one of my roles this year has been among the men in our church and been running a group we've called ourselves the Wild at Heart Men's Group. And so we meet periodically and we talk about lots of different things that could affect men and men relate to. And last time we met, maybe a month ago maybe, we talked on the topic of fear. And it was a topic that generated a lot of different discussion. Everyone, to some degree, struggles with some form of fear in their lives. And it was interesting just to get different guys' scope on how they see fear and how they deal with fear. And are our fears similar? So this morning I'm going to share with you a little bit about fear and just hopefully encourage you that God does want us to become overcomers of our fear and we can get to that place. I told a story this morning of when I was a kid and I was probably maybe 12 or 13 years old and I had a paper round. Like many of you may have had a paper round when you were kids. I earned $10 a week. It's daylight robbery now that I think back, but I got $10 a week for doing a paper round, delivered the daily news, and I used to get up at 5:30 every morning. Now for a young guy, 5:30, that's early. The sun wasn't even up at 5:30. And so I'd get up and I'd cycle off and I'd get my papers, and in the winter it was so cold and I'd rug up. The worst part about my memory is doing this paper run is that this particular run, the last street that I had to deliver to, there was this certain house. It was probably the third to last house I had to deliver to. And there in the driveway sat this big black dog. It's just this big black dog. And because it was kind of dark, I could only kind of see the black silhouette of this dog. And it would just sit there like a statue in the driveway. And I'd approach this driveway thinking to myself, is this dog friendly? Is it going to attack me? So anyway, I went up to the driveway, started folding up the paper to put it in the letterbox, and then just this dog just sparked to life. And it came racing down the driveway toward me and barking and growling, and I just panicked. I mean, what do? I just dropped the paper and tried to get my bike and I started cycling up the street. And this dog came tearing out of the driveway after me. And he was nibbling at trying to grab a hold of my ankle. I was wearing gumboots at the time and he couldn't get his jaw around my gumboots. And I remember thinking, I got away from the dog, and from then on, every morning was, how am I going to approach this house? Is the dog going to be there? It installed such a fear in me that every morning when I woke up, that was my first thought, was this big black dog. How am I going to face this big black dog today? Some mornings it was there, some mornings it wasn't there. Some mornings it was interested in me, some mornings it didn't care I was there. It just liked tormenting me. It just liked keeping me guessing. I think it would be fair to say that every one of us, to some degree, every one of us has a big black dog that provokes fear and anxiety in our hearts. Something that just continually causes unrest in our spirits. Winston Churchill's big black dog was depression, and he coined that phrase. But this morning, I'm going to coin the phrase the big black dog in relation to our fears. And if I was to ask you, what is your big black dog? What is that one thing in your life that just continually torments you? It's just in the background, continually just reminding you that it's there. I think that fear is one of those things in our lives that it really robs us of so much. It robs us of a quality of living. It robs us of some of the essential things that we want for a quality life. It robs us of our joy. It robs us of our peace. It robs us of a good night's sleep. It just gnaws away at us. And a lot of us are living with that fear on a daily basis, like I was on that paper round, just waiting for that fear to turn up. I was looking at a survey they did on fear, and it was an online survey, and people were asked to rate what are your top 10 fears? What are the top 10 things that install fear in you? And the survey was done through a wide range of people of all ages, male and female, and the results are quite interesting. So I'm going to read out what the top 10 fears were. And for you, it may be really different. For me, yep, we're all different, but it kind of gives us an indication of what exactly is playing on people's minds and what people are really fearful of. So fear number 10 was the fear of losing your freedom. That was fear number 10. Fear number 9 was the fear of physical pain. Fear number 8 was the fear of being disappointed or let down. Fear number 7 is the fear of the unknown. Fear number 6 is the fear of being miserable and unhappy. Then we move into the top 5. These are the top 5 biggies. And I think they're pretty accurate, but you could rearrange them to a certain degree. But fear number 5 is the fear of loneliness. I was just saying to the congregation in the other service that I think loneliness is actually a bigger fear than what we give it credit for. I think that the world is so populated today, and yet it's incredibly impersonal. And I think a lot of people fear being alone, that fear of loneliness. Am I going to be left alone? Number 4 was the fear of ridicule. And then the top 3, the fear of rejection. Number 2, the fear of death. And number 1, the fear of failure. So that's interesting. And as I say, you may not think that that's entirely accurate for you. I certainly think the top 5 would kind of be pretty accurate, may rearrange it to a certain degree. But fears show up in our lives in so many different ways, don't they? They show up as phobias and paranoias, fears that are really quite irrational. You can't actually explain why you're afraid of that, you just are. They're called irrational fears, and they surface in our lives. They can be the result of a past experience that's traumatised you to a certain degree. They can be maybe something from your childhood that you've experienced, maybe even something you don't really remember too well. But fear is one of those things that when it latches hold of you, you can carry it right through to your adult years. You can carry it right through to life. Does anyone here this morning have any phobias? Let's talk about some phobias. Does anyone have an acrophobia? Do you know what that is? The fear of spiders. Who has a fear of spiders? Oh, you brave lot. Just one honest lady. What about claustrophobia? Who has that fear? Few of you. There are so many irrational fears out there. Sorry? Claustrophobia. Yeah, I'm not too keen on small spaces either. My son Dylan has a fear of praying mantises. And I know that sounds really weird, eh? Praying mantises. When they were little, I used to do a lot of fun things with them. And one time we had a paddock over the road from where we lived, and it was a great place to kind of play hide and seek. And this particular night we were having a game of Spotlight. You know what Spotlight is? It's hide and seek in the dark. And so I partnered up with my older son Dylan, who was at the time he was just so young, maybe 10. And my brother Jeff, he partnered up with my younger son Nicholas. And so it was me and Dylan, we had to go and hide out in this field. And sorry, I'm going to laugh, but so we're hunkered down, right? We're hunkered down in the grass, and we're on high alert, because I don't know if you've ever hid in the dark in a field at night. But your senses are on high alert, and our eyeballs are just like this, and we're just waiting. And then I hear my son say to me, he says, "Hey, Dad." And I said, "What is it?" He said, "Dad, could you just shine a torch on my shoulder for a minute? I feel like there's something on my shoulder." And I said, "Okay, but make it quick, all right? I don't want to give away our position." So I turn the torch on, have a look at his shoulder, and sitting on his shoulder is this gigantic praying mantis just looking at him. And what went from a hidden hiding place became the whole neighbourhood knew we were going to get down there. And my son, he's 19 now, and he still has a fear of praying mantises. So I don't want this story ever getting back to him. I'll story. It's on YouTube. I have to do something about it. Isn't it interesting how something like that can just latch hold of us? Fear is irrational as a praying mantis or a spider or something. I think often our fears can also be of a spiritual nature as well. They can also be of a spiritual nature. The enemy finds a foothold in your life and he just seeks to exploit it. Once he's got his little foot in the door with fear, he latches on and he exploits that fear. There's a verse in Romans chapter 8:15 says this. It says, "You did not receive a spirit that makes you a slave to fear." It's interesting that he uses the terminology a slave to fear. But you receive a spirit of sonship. And I think fear has more influence and power in a person's life than we give it credit for. And I think that let's think about this for a moment. So many of the negative traits that we consider negative have a direct link to fear. Now let me explain what I mean by that. If we were to look at the negative trait of, let's say, greed, for example, greed is the fear that I won't have enough. It's directly linked to fear. The trait of rejection, they're all kind of linked to fear. They're all kind of siblings to a certain degree. Guilt is the fear that I may be found out. In our Wild at Heart men's group, we've talked a lot about this one, because if we were to do a history lesson on fear, we would go straight back to the book of Genesis, because that's where fear originated, was in the Garden of Eden. And it was all entwined in that sense of guilt that Adam felt. Remember, they ate the fruit, they felt the guilt, they experienced the fear, they hid, they were afraid of exposure. And it's all linked to fear. And so to a certain degree, we may say to ourselves, well, I don't really think I have any problem with fear. You may need to dig a little deeper, because a lot of the negative traits that we do struggle with are directly related to fear. Lack of confidence is the fear that I may fail or not measure up. Jealousy, it's the fear that somebody else may get what I want. See, they're all kind of linked. I think that sometimes, fear is so common amongst us sometimes that rather than looking to overcome it, all we do with fear is we try and manage it the best we can. We manage fear, and we usually do a pretty good job. And the way in which we manage fear often is we just try and drown it out. We drown it out. We try and we use things what I will call distractions to just drown out our fear. We'll busy our day, we'll join groups, we'll see people, we'll turn the TV up, we'll put on some music, we'll read, we'll do anything we can to crowd our lives with stuff that's going to drown out the fear. But the thing about fear, it's kind of like that dog in the driveway. It ain't going nowhere. It's got to be there tomorrow. And the difference between managing your fear and overcoming your fear, there's a big difference in that. When you manage your fear, it's still going to be there tomorrow. It's still going to be there waiting, or the next day. And I believe this morning that God wants us to be overcomers of our fear, that we can be overcomers of our fear. Managing our fears just wear us out. Overcoming our fears free us, give us a quality of life. Let me just talk quickly about some of the consequences of fear. Fear does a number of things to us. First thing it does is it divides our mind. It causes us to become paranoid. You ever met someone that's just really paranoid all the time, really paranoid, the world's against them? There's a conspiracy. Can't trust anybody. Everyone's out to betray me. That's a paranoid mind. And a paranoid mind is linked with fear. That's what fear does to us. It stifles our ability to think and act confidently. I don't know about you, but I would like to be a confident person. I would like to think and act confidently, but fear stifles that confidence. Fear stifles it. It causes indecision. It causes indecision. We fear making decisions because we fear that the decisions we make will be the wrong decision, so we make no decision. That's what indecisiveness is. It's directly related to fear. It steals our joy and our peace and our happiness, which are really important qualities of life. You take out those big three and life's pretty miserable without those. It affects our physical health. And we're learning more and more every day, aren't we, how sometimes our emotional state directly affects our physical state. So let's talk about fear and faith, and how do we marry the two together? How do we marry fear and faith together? What does God say about fear? And how do we approach it, and how do we overcome it? Because I believe this morning that God wants us to be overcomers, to overcome our fears. I'm going to look at 3 biblical examples this morning, and I want to talk about 3 different men in 3 different boats in 3 different storms. And hopefully I want to shine a new light on these 3 stories, and I hope that there will be some light bulb moments for you as we go through these stories. So the first man that I want to talk about, the first man in the storm, is the obvious one. It's the story of Jonah. And we all know that story really well, so I'm not going to go into it too much, other than we know that Jonah was called to preach in a city called Tarshish, and he was to go and preach a strong message of repentance. And Jonah was not keen for that. So he jumped on another boat and he went in the opposite direction. So that's where we pick up the story. A storm arises, and I want to pick up the story in Jonah chapter 1, verse 7. So bearing in mind, they're on the boat's being swamped, the sailors are just freaking out, and they're throwing things overboard, they're just trying to stay afloat. So we pick it up in verse 7. So the sailors said to each other, "Let's draw lots and find out who is to blame for getting us into this danger." And they did so, and Jonah's name was drawn. So they said to him, "Now then, tell us, who is to blame for this? What are you doing here? What country do you come from? And what is your nationality?" "I'm a Hebrew," Jonah answered. "I worship the Lord, the God of heaven, who made land and sea." And Jonah went on to tell him that he was running away from the Lord. The sailors were terrified and said to him, "That was an awful thing to do." The storm was getting worse all the time. So the sailors asked him, "What should we do to stop the storm?" And Jonah answered, "Throw me into the sea and it will calm down. I know it is my fault and that you are caught in this violent storm." So this might be one of the first Jonah stories that I'm not even going to mention the whale, because we're not even going to get that far. See, Jonah represents a certain person. Jonah represents a person whose fears are self-inflicted. Whose fears are self-inflicted. I wonder this morning, have you ever run into a person that just seems to be their own worst enemy? We bump into them from time to time, don't we? And we coin that phrase, "Oh, they're just their own worst enemy." Wherever they go, they just create havoc and chaos. It's like this black cloud just seems to follow them wherever they go. And there are people like that. You probably have got a name in your head right now as I'm telling this story. You probably know straight away, yeah, that's so-and-so. And wherever that person goes, they just create a storm. And so Jonah represents that person. They make horrendous decisions, they make unhealthy choices, and they choose to live a life on their own terms. And yet they wonder why the storms in life follow them around. They wonder why they're constantly battling with their fears and insecurities. And sometimes they even blame God for them. And they question, where is God in this storm? So a good place to start when we begin to talk about overcoming our fears is to start with this question. And the question is simply this: am I consistently seeking to be in the will of God? Am I consistently seeking to be in the will of God? Am I consistently finding comfort in his presence. Because Jonah represents a person who steps out of the will of God, and there's no peace out there. As we gravitate toward the presence of God, we'll know a peace. We'll know a peace. See, fear sometimes is a great indicator. It's like a gauge. Sometimes fear can be a gauge to tell us it's time for you to reposition yourself closer to God. And yet sometimes our human inclination is when we go through some tough times, we actually move away from God. And we move away from all those things that are good for us and the people that can help us and install in us a sense of peace and calm. And so Jonah represents that person of stepping outside of the will of God, and his fears and his insecurities become self-inflicted. And as with the storm that Jonah was in, it not only affected him, it affected other people. And that's the thing about a self-inflicted fear and insecurities, is it not only affects you, it affects all of those around you. And I wonder whether or not you've ever been the victim of someone else's self-inflicted storm. You've somehow innocently just become swept up in their storm because of their decisions and the way in which they've chosen to live their life. We get swept up in that. Or has someone else been the victim of your self-inflicted storm? Decisions you've made. You've moved outside of the will of God, and it's created havoc for you, and somehow other people have become caught up in that as well. So that's a Jonah mentality. That's the first storm I want to talk about. The second storm I want to talk about is the storm that Paul, the Apostle Paul, was in. And we can read about that storm in the book of Acts, if you're following. It's in Acts chapter 7. Just rearrange my papers. Okay, so the background with this storm is this. Okay, so at this point in time, Paul is a prisoner, and he's on his way to Rome, and he's going on trial. So he has a date with Caesar. Things are looking really grim for him. It's not looking promising, but that's the background. And so on the way to Rome, Paul stands up on the boat, and he has this prophetic word that he gives to the crew. And he says, look, I need to tell you guys that a storm is coming. A raging storm is on its way, and there's going to be great loss. And so he's trying to give them the heads up. And so the crew, they kind of dismiss him. He's just a religious nutter. So they don't take too much to what he says. And then sure enough, the storm comes. And so this is where we pick up the story. In Acts chapter 7, verse 21. It says, after the men had gone a long time without food, Paul stood before them and said, men, you should have listened to me. That's another way of saying, I told you so. Men, you should have listened to me and not have sailed from Crete. Then we would have avoided all this damage. But now I beg you, take course. Not one of you will lose his life. Only the ship will be lost. For last night an angel of the Lord, to whom I belong and to whom I worship, came to me and said, don't be afraid, Paul. You must stand before the emperor. And God in his goodness to you has spared the lives of all those who are sailing with you. So take courage, men, for I trust in God that it will be just as... Okay, so Paul. Who does Paul represent? Well, firstly, I want to say that I think the church need a whole heap more Pauls. I really do. Paul represents that person who rises up in the midst of the storm or a crisis or an event of some kind and declares that the purposes of the Lord will prevail. That's who Paul represents. Someone that can stand up in the midst of the chaos and say the Lord's will be done. To install hope in a chaotic situation. You know, our world needs hope. Our world needs hope right at the moment. Our world needs voices of a prophetic nature that will rise up and declare that the purposes of the Lord will prevail. Because without hope there is hopelessness. And we see that every night on the TV. The world is going through a turbulent time. There's so much change happening in the world at the moment. in such a short amount of time. There's so much here. It creates uncertainty and it creates fear. And I think a lot of people are genuinely fearful. And they're waiting for that voice, someone to stand up and say, hey, there's hope. There's hope in this crisis. The purposes of the Lord will prevail. Like many of you, I've had times in my own life where it feels as though my boat has been swamped. In fact, most of you could identify one or two times in your life, you'd call that your big life crisis. And I went through a big life crisis where I felt the boat was going down. It's going down whether I like it or not. And you know what, I've been thinking over the week, I thought about all the people that spoke into my life during my crisis. And I've got to be really honest with you, I received a lot of really, really bad advice. I mean, I think people's intentions were good, but I received some really dumb advice over that time. Things that people said to me, the advice they gave to me, all the weird and wonderful ideas that people told me I should do and think and be and where I should go. A lot of it was, as I think back, it was really bad. But I was really, really blessed in that I had a handful, just a handful of people that spoke good advice, that spoke words of hope back into my life. People that realigned my thinking back to the purposes of God. Because, when your boat's sinking, all you're thinking about is self-preservation. That's all that's going through your mind, is self-preservation. How do I save myself from this situation? And it took just a small handful of really godly men to just realign my thinking back to the purposes of God and just to install words of hope. Just words of purpose, that God's purposes will prevail in your life. And slowly over time I came through that storm. And you know what, now that I'm on the other side of that storm, I want to be that person to be able to speak into the lives of someone else. Because I think that's how it works. I want to be that voice of hope. I know I'm not always the person I want to be, but I aspire to be that person. I want to be able to speak into someone's life and say, hey, I know you're going through the ringer at the moment, but the purposes of the Lord will prevail. The purposes of the Lord, it's a prophetic statement. And that's who Paul was. He was making a prophetic statement. The storm's not going away, the ship's going down, but we will come through it. There's purpose in the storm. And so I think there's a shortage of Pauls in the church today. And you can be that person. You have the ability to speak hope into the life of another person. To be a prophetic voice of hope in your circumstances, in your community, and while everyone else is looking to fight the storm, you're seeing God's purpose prevail in the storm. So that's Paul. Oh, can I grab the newsletter? Because I was going to read from that version rather than my Bible version. So the third man and the third storm, the third boat, is obviously Jesus. And this is a great, great story. It's on your newsletter, Matthew chapter 8, verse 23 to 27. It says this, Then he got into the boat and his disciples followed him. And suddenly a furious storm came up on the lake, so that the waves swept over the boat. But Jesus was sleeping. And the disciples went and woke him, saying, Lord, save us, we're going to drown. And he replied, You of little faith, why are you so afraid? Then he got up and rebuked the winds and the waves, and it was completely calm. And the men were amazed and asked, What kind of man is this, that even the winds and the waves obey him? This is a great, great story. And when I first read this story, you know what, I really identify with the disciples. I really do. I read this story and I thought, well, it was kind of hard on Jesus to rebuke his disciples. I mean, the boat was going down and he was sleeping. And I guess the reason why I identify with the disciples is because, in all due respect to the Lord, but there's been times in my past I've wondered whether he's been sleeping during my storm. And so I can immediately identify where the disciples are coming from. They're saying, Lord, why were you sleeping? I wonder whether you've ever felt like Jesus has been sleeping during the midst of your storm. You've just been waiting for some intervention. You've been waiting for some calm. And yet the storm continues to rage. You've been fearful, been full of insecurities, wondering what the future holds. So I want to ask the question, why was Jesus sleeping, do you think? Was it because he was just straight up tired from a busy agenda, which he probably was? You know what, I think there's more to it than that, I really do. I want to make some suggestions this morning. Could it be one of the reasons Jesus was sleeping is because he had full confidence in his disciples that they could speak directly into their storm themselves? Interesting angle, eh? Interesting angle. But Jesus made it really clear that all authority I've given to you. And there's a part of me that thinks, you know what? I think that Jesus actually wants us to get to a place in our lives where we can speak into our storm. We can declare peace. We can declare calm. That it's within us to do that. Now you may say, well, how does that look? How does that practically play out? Well, it's really simple. Let me give you an example. It would be like me praying this morning, Lord, I just pray and declare peace in this place this morning. I declare peace upon this group of people this morning. That if anyone here has come this morning with fear and insecurity, with a storm raging in their own soul, Lord, I want to declare your peace in this place. And I declare it. That's how simple it is. And yet we don't do it. God's given us this amazing ability to speak into the storms of our life. And we're capable of doing that. And it's not just limited to church time. I'm getting into the habit of taking it into my workplace. My workplace can be really chaotic. It can change in the blink of an eye from a calm to a raging storm. People get tempers fray. People get stressed. And you know what, in those times I'm learning just to pray, Lord, I want to speak peace into this place. I just want to speak calm into this place. And I want to encourage you to do that. I want to encourage you to begin to pray with authority. It's like the story I told of the dog in the driveway. Have you ever come across a dog that is more bark than it is bite? It comes racing out at you, barking, and it looks really intimidating. But the minute you turn around, just sit down, and it cools up, and then it goes running off. And that's how fear is. Sometimes we have to speak directly into our fear. Say, enough. I speak peace into this situation. I speak calm into this situation. And so this week I want to encourage you, don't be Jonah. Don't be outside of the will of God. Don't be someone who causes self-inflicted fears in your life simply because you're not sitting in the presence of the Lord. Be close to God. Be comforted by God. Let fear be a gauge. If your heart is fearful, let that fear draw you back to God. Let that fear draw you in, not repel you away from God. Don't become a loner when you're fearful. Let it be a gauge for you. Number 2, be a Paul. Be a person of hope. Be a person that declares that the purposes of the Lord will prevail. The purposes of the Lord will prevail in my life. Fear not, and speak into the lives of others. People need to hear your hope. And because I've been there, and so have you, and you've had people speak directly into your storm, and you've come out of the other side. And the way it goes is now you have to give that on to someone else. The comfort you've received needs to be passed on. And it's not hard to find someone that's struggling with fears and insecurity. It's not hard at all. You'll find someone, and you need to be a Paul, install words of hope. And then finally, Jesus. Remember that Jesus controls the storm. And you carry the presence of the Lord within you. Jesus said in Matthew 18 when he commissioned his disciples, he said, go into all the world and do what I've been doing. I give you permission to do what I've been doing. Go and heal the sick and do all this stuff. Speak to the storm in your life. So I encourage you to do that. And so bless you this morning. Thank you for having me. And we're just going to close in prayer. And I'm going to pray that the presence of the Lord comes. And I'm going to pray that there be a peace amongst us. And if you've come here this morning with a heavy heart, maybe you've come and your soul has been in turmoil. And you're sitting here this morning, you're thinking, man, that message just, it's like it was designed for me. Well, it was designed for you. And so I want to encourage you, let's speak into the chaos this morning. And let's just declare some calm and some reprieve. Let's pray.